Woody Wommack joined by national recruiting analyst Eric Bossi and Corey Evans to talk basketball recruiting rankings. Big update this week. Bossi, first let's talk to you and let's talk about how different this process was for you guys, especially given everything that's happened and a lot of the events that you guys ended up getting to see.
Sure, it was very different. We got to see the majority of the high school season. Only a few states really had their state championships cut, and there wasn't really a lot of kids to see from those anyway. But it's still a little bit different. And the big thing is you miss out on the postseason All-Star games and things of that nature. So trying to discuss any moves, particularly at the top, became a little bit more difficult. And we really probably had to maybe be a little bit more conservative than we wanted to be in some situations, just because there isn't as much information as there usually is when making a final ranking.
Yeah, Corey, tell us about missing out on, the McDonald's game and stuff like that, because a lot of times those practices and that game is where you really sort out kind of the best of the best.
Yeah, we were waiting practically all winter long to settle that number one spot between Kate Cunningham, Jalen Green, Evan Mobley, and even maybe a guy like BJ Boston or Zaire Williams. And to not have that type of chance and that platform to really evaluate those guys and to see those guys under the brightest of lights, it made it a lot more difficult to really, settle on who number one is and number three is and number five is.
All right, so you guys ended up sticking with Cade Cunningham, number one. You mentioned it was a close call. So Bossi, why did he end up hanging on to that top spot?
A lot of things, really. Easily the most consistent of guys, and that top three was, in particular, was really, really tough because they all have great qualities and things to argue for their case. But the consistency, winning, and also how good he is on both ends of the floor. He plays 1 through 3 on offense and also can defend all those positions. Can probably even defend a 4 when he gets to college when it comes right down to it. And I also think that of anyone on the list, he does the best job of elevating the play of those around him. And when you're talking about, a superstar or an elite player in the rankings, when you have that little thing added on the top of it, it's kind of hard to go against. Jalen Green finished really strong, put up huge scoring numbers, is probably the best scorer in the class. And Mobley is probably the best defensive player, certainly the best defensive big man. So they all had their things, but that consistency for Cade, I think, allowed us to say, we need to keep him number one.
And how about the significance of Oklahoma State signing the number one overall player? I mean, that's a historic feat, and it kind of I know there was some unique circumstances there, but how big is this for their program?
It's really big. It creates a lot of excitement. There were some pretty big expectations in Stillwater this year. They hit a bump in the road during the middle part of the season when point guard Isaac Likely was sick and out for a while, and it took them a bit to regain their stride. But then they finished strong in Big 12 play and looked like a team, with just a couple of additions, not only Cunningham, but the rest of their class, which is a top 10 class. There's a lot of reason to be excited. And obviously, I think everyone knows that his brother, Cannon, was hired as an assistant coach, but, it got them the player, and theoretically it should propel them into the NCAA tournament next year.
The rest of the top 4 stayed the same. Jalen Green 2, Evan Mobley 3, BJ Boston 4. But then we had a little bit of a shakeup, at least. Zaire Williams moves up to number 5. Corey, talk to us about him and why you guys felt comfortable in jumping him up.
Zaire Williams has been someone that has progressively gotten better and better. Not just his talent base alone and his mental makeup, but also his fit in today's game. I mean, he's 6'7", can play the 2, 3, and 4. Light-footed athlete, high IQ kid. Going to Stanford, which is similar to Oklahoma State, kind of a unique story and background there, going there to the Pac-12 program. But in all, the consistency that he's had with getting better and better, playing on the biggest of stages that Cedar Canyon was on this past winter, and the growth that he's been, that trajectory, he had to buy into stuff like that. And with Zaire Williams, just knowing the intangibles, the physicality, the tangibles, it's too much to really deny with a top 5 ranking.
Yeah, and it seemed like, I mean, they played a national schedule this year. Did you guys find yourselves, I guess we can ask you, Bossy, getting to evaluate them more than you traditionally would during the high school season just because of how many marquee games they played?
Yeah, I think so. And I think to their credit, especially with BJ and Zaire, no matter how good someone plays, we're all human. You can get a little bit of fatigue from seeing someone over and over again. It happens every year. Fans get mad about ESPN shoving someone down everyone's throat, right? Or this or that, and that could have happened, but it didn't. Part of it was maybe that Zaire wasn't eligible until close to midway through the season because of a transfer from his previous high school. So for a while, it was just kind of like the BJ Boston show, and then of course you've got Bronny James and everything else that comes along with Sierra Canyon. But then when Zaire came in, it kind of injected a little bit more life into it. And while you were seeing them a lot, you were seeing them a lot against a lot of other good players and a lot of other good teams. So, why wouldn't you watch them playing against the best and watching the other best players play against them?
The guy who slipped a couple spots because of the moves of Williams and Scotty Barnes, Terrence Clark drops down to number 7. I mean, not a big drop from 5 to 7. What was the difference there in terms of separating those 3 guys, Eric?
Boy, not a lot of difference. I think it came down to a little bit of consistency and just being sure of a fit and things. Scotty Barnes is another one who he plays so many positions theoretically in the college game, and he's got leadership qualities about him that we really feel he elevates the play of those guys around him. Clark, while a talent, he can kind of come and go as his jump shot goes. He wears his motions on his sleeve a little bit sometimes, and he can kind of get in a rut and let a few bad plays turn into, several in a row and kind of get off track. So just a little bit more consistency and surety in terms of performance every night and stuff like that. But, I'm sure there'll be people who disagree with us, and I can understand why, because Terrence he's a big time talent. He can shoot it from deep. He can create on his own. He's a legitimate shooting guard. He's athletic. The separation between these guys at the top is so razor thin. It's really the top 12, 15 guys. It's a really good class. It's our best class in a couple of years, and it's one that I think we're going to see a lot of early success from in the college ranks.
Getting back up to really near the top, you mentioned Jalen Green was right in there in the mix, and he might have been able to make a strong case for the number 1 spot if you had a chance to see him in the All-Star circuit. What do you like about his game, Corey? And do you think it could be a situation where maybe he is the better guy in college, or ends up being the higher draft pick?
Yeah, it's going to be hard to compare Jalen Green to Kay Cunningham, at least next year, with Jalen Green going the G League route and Kay going to Oklahoma State. But I think those 2 guys will be connected for a while now. I think the next 10 years, they're that talented, to where I think you can do no wrong with either or, with Jalen Green or Kay Cunningham. Jalen Green is probably, bar none, one of the best athletes in the high school game. But he's more than that. He's a 6'5", now 6'6" potentially, true 2 guard with secondary playmaking skills about him. But it was his jump shot in that progression that he had there, with from 15 feet, 20 feet, even 23, 24 feet. His fit in today's game, with that size, with the athleticism, with the shot making abilities, you put it all into one, and it makes what is arguably the top prospect in that class.
You mentioned, of course, he's going the G League route, and there are several guys here, I guess, in the top 17 or so that are going to go that route. How do you think how does that impact you guys' thought process? Because obviously we're college focused, and this is a brand new thing. So, Bossi, how much did you guys have to factor that in, especially when it came time to say, okay, we're still ranking them as far as they are as prospects, but a lot of these guys we're not going to see in college.
I don't think it really had any impact, because I don't think that Corey or myself or Dan McDonald or Russ Wood, who and some of the other people who chipped in with thoughts on the rankings, would want to either boost somebody up or take them down just because they're going a different route than what is typically done. And we've never done that with any of the guys in the past, whether it had been RJ Hampton or any of these guys. The only reason LaMelo Ball was out of the final ranks because he didn't play high school basketball for quite such time. And then there was that weird deal with Spire Academy last year. So, but no, it doesn't make a difference. I don't think, it makes a difference in terms of maybe trying to compare their performances as time goes on, especially for that first year or two. But in terms of doing a final ranking, we don't look at Isaiah Todd and say, oh, well, he's going to the G League, so he doesn't matter as much to us, so we can slide him down some. That's not the case at all. It's still trying to rank the best prospects as best we can with the information that we have.
Yeah. Do you guys think this is just a little bit off topic, but is there any potential, like, okay, say, Cade Cunningham comes next year and leads his team to the Final Four, and Jalen Green is essentially off of the radar, at least from the public eye perspective. Do you think that'll seep into the minds of NBA GMs and stuff like that, or do you think they're going to be able to see these guys at the G League enough that not playing college basketball won't necessarily hurt their stock? Eric, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I think that remains to be seen. You got to understand the NBA and the G League have a lot invested in making sure that what this new pathway they're trying works out, right? So they're going to see those guys quite a lot, in Los Angeles, where it looks like they're going to be. There's going to be no lack of exposure, but they're going to be playing a limited schedule, and the game setups are going to be a little bit different, and it may not be easy to see some of those more intangible things like leadership and raising those guys around you. And from a non-NBA GM standpoint, I think what will be interesting to see is in terms of prospects coming up behind is, let's say Cade Cunningham turns into the hottest thing in college basketball. What that does for his personal brand and potentially what it does for him as an endorser of different things when he gets to the NBA, how that compares to the guys that go to the G League path. That's what I think the kids are going to be watching much more closely. Whereas, the NBA guys are going to be focused on totally different things.
All right, another guy that moved up a few spots, one of the biggest movers there in the top 15 at least, was Caleb Love. He goes from 18 to 15. Corey, he leapfrogged a couple guys. So, what did you see from him that helped him make that move?
Yeah, it's similar to what Bossi was discussing with numbers 5 through 7 and the how close those guys really were. And with Caleb making that 3-spot jump, he could have even jumped a few spots higher. And again, probably 10, 11 to number 20, those guys are razor thin, that margin. But Caleb Love is another guy that has progressively gotten better and better. He's an athletic combo guard that is likely the next lead guard at Carolina in the fall. So I think we talk about the right fit, the right system. I think the chances of him flourishing next year at Carolina and having the ingredients around him with shot makers, big men, and that Carolina break. And then you get back to what he is a 6'3" guard that is improved as a shot maker, a great athlete. He's tough-minded. He defends. So there are a lot of variables he brings to the floor, a lot of tangibles that he represents that you get to buy into.
Who was the Bossi is for you? Who was the toughest guy that didn't make that kind of top 20, top 25 cut that you think really would have had this shot given, maybe one or two more looks?
Oh man, that's a tough one because, I would say, maybe one that's a little bit more difficult. He's at number 21, and he's another who's going to the pro right. He's going straight to the NBA draft in Josh Hall. He's the one guy who I don't feel like any of us ever really got a chance to see against the majority of the rest of the best players. And he didn't make the McDonald's game because he was ineligible for it for being a fifth-year guy. So, he's one we only got to see him basically strictly against high school competition. We didn't get to really see him at as many of the big camps, or, you know, we wouldn't have seen him at McDonald's and things like that. So he became a little trickier one, because you got to really go on your gut on it and say, well, you know, this guy's 6'9", almost, can knock down shots from deep and has some athleticism, and while still a little bit raw, has a lot of upside. But, you know, he's one that I worry could prove in a couple of years, especially after NBA development, one that, you know, we should have had way lower, or, you know, there's some bust potential there too, just in terms of exposure to the big time and things like that, and not being able to evaluate him in some of the same settings as other guys. So guys like him are tough. You know, if you go a little bit further down, I know one that Corey and I really talked a lot about, a guy who's just outside of the 5-star range at number 34, is Andre Curbelo, because point guard headed to Illinois, while he might not have as much top line upside as some of the other guys, there's a good chance that he's one of the top 10, top 5 most impactful guys at the college level, because of what he can maybe do running a team and elevating those guys around you. And that's a tough call sometimes, because to me, a guy can be a 5-star, and it doesn't mean he has to go to the NBA, but he better have an incredible college career to back that up. Like, you know, if a guy for some reason doesn't make the NBA, but is a 2-time, you know, conference player of the year or something like that, you know, you can't knock it. Like, you go back a few years back, Perry Ellis, who played at Kansas for, people will joke, you know, 17 or 18 years. He had an unbelievable college career, right? And one that was befitting of a guy that was ranked in the top 25. But for the pro level, between injuries and just not quite being the right size or fit for the NBA, he was never the NBA. So that's why, you know, at the bottom of those rankings, it's not just, people sometimes say, oh, it's just about pro potential, stuff like that. It's not that. We try and figure out all that stuff. That's why we're able to take a guy like a Andre Curbelo, or say a Micah Peavy headed to Texas Tech, and some of these guys, and rank them so highly, even though there may be some holes in their game or some potential worries, but we can feel good based on the system they're going to, the coaches they're going to, that they're going to be super productive college players that, you know, whether or not they make the NBA is immaterial. We feel like we have to rank them high because of the impact they're going to have on their college programs.
Yeah, just like a favorite of mine of yours, Peyton Pritchard, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, we ranked him pretty highly, but looking back in retrospect, probably could have ranked him a little bit higher based on, you know, the impact he had on the college game. And, you know, maybe if we would have had him as a 5-star, he might not have been a 5-star in terms of NBA potential, but his performance certainly would have made him fitting of a 5-star ranking.
Corey, let's talk a little bit more about Curbelo. He did make a big leap anyway, moved up 9 spots, and Bossi said that he's one of your guys. So you think he can have that type of lasting impact at the next level?
Yeah, I think the next level and beyond. He's one of the biggest winners in the 2020 class. As Bossi stated, the upside, what is it? We're still trying to figure it out, but Brad Underwood's already discussed in full how excited he is to have him in Champaign next year. It might be a multiple year stop there, maybe 4 years. Illinois fans are probably hoping for, but when you're asking and talking about immediate production from the point guard position, Andre Curbelo is exactly that. And, you know, Bossi and I even discussed earlier this week, I mean, who might be playing the longest out of this 2020 class? And if I had to pick 10 names that might be playing 12 years from now, Curbelo would be one of them.
Oh, high praise. We know the top stayed similar. I mean, a lot of these are, you know, you can't really fault a guy if he faults from 14 to 18 or whatever. That doesn't mean you guys are down on him. But we did have a guy jump up quite a bit down in the 50s. Tari Eason jumped from 78 to 53. So what did he do to impress you, Bossi, to be one of the guys who made one of the biggest leaps of anybody here in the top 150?
You know, he had an incredible senior season up in Seattle, and he's versatile. He's a 6'8" 4-man who can put the ball on the floor and beat guys off the dribble. He's a productive rebounder. He's starting to expand his game to be able to shoot the ball a little bit facing the rim. And, you know, we can't just pay lip service to production and wins mattering, right? Like, we have to reward guys for it. And to win a state championship in Washington, people don't necessarily think of that as like a big time basketball state. But if you look at the run they made through to the state playoffs and who they beat along the way and the level of ranked players that they beat along the way and how badly they beat them, you've got to reward that guy for that. And also, he's going to a situation at Cincinnati where he should be able to step right in and be a big time producer. And it's one of those guys I just look at. I'm in disbelief sometimes that he wasn't much more of a priority on the West Coast and in the Pac-12. And maybe we'll be wrong on it, but I think we're going to be right, or else we wouldn't have moved him up so bad. But I just think he did those things that we ask a player to do. It can't be just about wins and losses. This, Woody, from your time on the football side, in ranking a player and trying to predict the future. But in the case of guys who are a little bit even, I think those things can help push you over the top, because what a guy's mental makeup is and what he's about. And I think that needs to be rewarded, and guys need to know that, we do notice things like that. It isn't just about who's the best NBA prospect or who's going to the biggest name school or anything like that. There's so much more involved in that. And, I think he met all those things.
You guys also had the issue of a couple of guys that moved up from 2021. I know some of the guys have been slotted already, but two guys that debuted this time, Jackson Robinson and Adama Sanago. They both, Robinson came in at 57, Sanago at 79. How tough was it to do that? Because these reclassifications kind of come at you guys fast and furious, and these two both came here at the end at a time where you didn't get a chance to see them at all, other than what they did during their high school seasons.
Yeah, it's tough because there's a few things at hand. One, we've never watched them with the mind of, okay, this guy's going to be in the class of 2020. How does he compare to the guys in 2020, right? So that's one thing. And another thing that I think is lost in all this is part of a ranking in one class, especially you're younger, is factoring in like, okay, with Jackson Robinson, he was in the top 35-ish range or top 40 range in 2021. You're factoring in for a slender, physically immature guy that he's got another year to get ready for college basketball. Now, all of a sudden, not only is he skipping a senior year of high school, but he's going into a situation where he's more than likely not going to have a typical summer in the weight room and with coaches to make a transition to college. And so it's speeding up a process quite a bit, and it's shaving a year off of development time. And so that makes it tough to rank. And, I think for the most part, we've seen a lot of the guys who have done this have some struggles, unless they're just, otherworldly players. It didn't affect a guy like Andrew Wiggins when he did it or something like that. But a guy like Robinson, who's young and skipping a class on top of it, it's a big factor. And, it's not easy to figure out when you've been watching a guy for 2 years with one thing in mind, and now there's a totally different thing in mind, and you've got 3 days left till you put out final rankings to figure it out. So it's not easy.
Yeah, Corey, how do you think a guy like Robinson translates? And along the line of thinking what Bossi was saying, how do you weigh that? Because like he said, you're thinking, oh yeah, this kid will be great in another year when he puts on 10 or 15 pounds, and instead he's going to be walking into college now instead of having another year of high school.
Yeah, Bossi brought up a great point with, we haven't measured him as a 2020 kid. He doesn't turn 18 years old until December. Where is he in that process of developing? Is he a late bloomer? Is he going to fill out appropriately? All we've ever seen him play is 1,500, 1,600 basketball. He plays out of Oklahoma, doesn't really play on a mainstream high school program as well. So that's a big jump going from, out of Oklahoma and 1,600 travel basketball to the SEC, and to a place that needs perimeter help at Texas A&M. So it's not easy, especially when you compare him to someone like, Puff Johnson, who is not too far behind and is somewhat similar. we've seen Puff. We've seen him play the national high school schedule. We've seen him play on the 1700 level on the EYBL. So comparing those two, now granted, Puff is a year and a half older than him, or a year older than Jackson, but it's not easy.
One of the guys who wasn't ranked previously jumps into number 66, Kai Soto. Bossi, that's a relatively high debut for the final rankings. What can you tell us about him?
Yeah, and Kai is someone we actually worked in here recently about a month ago. But really didn't have kind of a final thing. And he's another one who's taken that G League path. He's from Philippines. He's a 7-footer. He's mobile. Not the most physical guy around. Offense still developing. Another one that in terms of if you're looking compared to most of the other guys on the list, we've not had near as much opportunity to scout and to scout against as many guys. So the tendency is to go conservative on those guys, but he's certainly intriguing. When you're that big and you're that fluid, you're going to get every chance possible to play basketball at the highest level. And so he's one where that G League pathway probably makes some sense, because he can just be, all he cares about is playing pro basketball anyway. Like, he didn't come to the States to try and, lead a team to the national championship. He came to the States to try and increase his pro prospects. So doing that makes sense. How much weight can he put on this year? How will you adjust to the level of competition, with each step up? Those are the questions. But we wanted to get him in there and fairly high, but with the information available, it's hard to go too high on it. I would rather a guy end up being a little better than we thought he was in the rankings than worse. When things go down, especially in a business where you're going to get some stuff right and you're going to get plenty of stuff wrong just by the nature of dealing with teenagers. But, wanted to get him in there and wanted to have him fairly aggressive, but as aggressive as we could be based on the information that we've been able to get in watching him.
All right, before we wrap up, anybody else you guys really wanted to dive into and talk about here, moves-wise? And we touched on a lot of the guys who made big moves. It just obviously was just such a tough ranking for you guys, one of the toughest ones I'm sure you've done in the last decade or so, given this lack of one final look. But anybody else you want to touch on, Bossi?
I don't know if it's anyone in particular I want to touch on. I would just more, and I think Corey will agree with this and echo this, speak to the overall strength of this class. I really feel like 1 through 150 is littered with guys who can come in and make an impact right away. We really, at the end, Corey and I are both like, we see guys in here that we can see being all conference players perhaps, or, being significant contributors. We look at we spent a lot of time in this 80 to 100-ish range where we've got guys like Trayman Mark, Kadari Richmond, Selton Miguel, Colby Jones, Ryan Kalkbrenner, JJ Traynor. Like, we're both convinced there's going to be a couple guys out of that section who probably eventually makes the NBA just because of the depth of this class. Now, obviously, if we knew which one of those guys was going to be the one, or which one of those guys was going to be the multiple-time all-conference player, we would have ranked them higher. But it's one of those things, like, there was never a point with like, oh man, how are we going to fill out this list? It was much more difficult saying, how are we going to leave some of these guys out because we like them so much? So, it's a good thing. It's a class where I think easily 175 to 190 guys had legitimate cases to be in the top 150, whereas in some years, like, there's only about 125 guys that you really feel are legitimate top 150 players. So I really like this class. I really like it for the future of college basketball. I think there's a lot of longevity with it in terms of instant impact guys and guys who a couple years from now, they're going to be like, oh man, how was Eric Gaines only ranked number 92, even though maybe his freshman year might be a little bit up and down as he adjusts to the rigors of college basketball. But maybe by the time that guy's a junior, it's like, holy crud, where did this guy come from?
Yeah, I was going to ask you guys. So which guy on this list is the next Obi Toppin?
If we knew it, he would be ranked much higher. That's for sure.
All right, Corey, you got anybody else you want to touch on?
No, that's about it. I think Eric hit it right on the head there. There is so much depth in this class, and guys like Eric Gaines and Isaiah Cottrell and Eugene Brown. I mean, there's some prospects that are fringe 100 guys that, you know, in any other year, maybe in 2021, they might be top 35, top 40. It speaks to the depth of this class. And just like you said, I mean, it's the past 2-3 months have not been the easiest when it comes to completing this class and the rankings for it. But just like Eric said again, the amount of talent infiltrating the college ranks next year, and that should have multiple year stays at that level, it's nothing short.
Yeah, it was a bummer for me not to get to go to McDonald's and see guys and give my opinion after seeing them for 2 days. So I'm sure you guys were really bummed out. The one guy I'm going to put my stake down here that I really like, Bossi, Jaden Springer. He's my favorite in terms of guys that I watched going through the film. So he's my sleeper. I think he could really be a top 10 pick one day.
Yeah, well, you're really going out on a limb with the guy ranked number 14 in the country, Woody. Like, I mean, way to really lay it all on the line there, and put your reputation at risk.
That's right. I think he could move up. He could be a potential lottery pick at number 14 overall in the country. So, all right, guys, thanks for hanging out. I really appreciate it, and be sure to check out the rankings on Rivals.com. Rolling out all week position rankings and various other stuff. So, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.